coffee.
Nice. Are you a breakfast person, or
you are echoing? I don't know if that's just me. Yeah, it's a lot better. Yes, so I am an espresso person. I can, consume enough coffee to give myself a mild heart attack.
Nice. Okay, let's start. Danielle, welcome to Product.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off by saying, when people ask you, Danielle, what do you do?
Oh man, this is like when you ride in Lyft in the morning and they ask you. I kind of make stuff up sometimes, but mostly I just say I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mattermark, and then I'm a coder turned business person, and sometimes I'm a writer too.
When people say, what's Mattermark, when they ask you that?
Yeah, I see Mattermark is a tool for figuring out which companies are doing well. So we track about 1.4 million companies, and we help people identify signals of growth.
Yeah. And Mattermark has, you've been doing this for how many years now?
3, a little over 3.
And it's pivoted a bunch since it was previously a different startup. Tell us the evolution.
Yeah, so we started out as a completely different company called Referly, and we went through Y Combinator the summer of 2012. That was a product that let you refer other products to friends, and then if they bought them, friends would get paid, you'd get paid. And so we shut that down after about a year, and we launched Mattermark initially as a media property, wanting to write about companies with a data-driven approach to journalism. But pretty quickly, as we were doing that and collecting data, we realized there was a lot of value in actually turning that data into a product itself. And so pretty quickly, we started selling a SaaS subscription. And I guess there's like a whole story from there, but that's how the pivot happened. And then we launched really early with an MVP, and we've kind of been building Mattermark in public ever since, sharing a lot of things about how it's going, sharing our financials and traction and product direction, and doing stuff like this with you.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from you guys about building in public, and definitely followed some of your leads there. This question's from Hoover. Mattermark seems to be doing fantastic, but seems to be selling to kind of the investor audience right now, which he says is somewhat niche. How do you think about the Mattermark Grandmaster plan?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think our story publicly is a little different from our business privately. So Mattermark is also really useful for salespeople or any kind of deal maker who wants to qualify who they're working with. And I think a big thing that we've tried to do is just be very selective about who our customers are. So on our website, I think our marketing is still very geared towards how do I get VCs to sign up for Mattermark. But the grand plan is to help any deal maker qualify their accounts and do outbound only to people they actually should be closing. So every salesperson or deal maker who has a thesis about who they should have as a customer, whether it's a VC saying, hey, we do B2B deals in the early stage, or it's a salesperson saying, hey, my territory is Boston tech companies. And we want to help them find all the companies in that area and rank them so that they can spend time on the most valuable stuff and not waste time on unqualified leads. So about half our revenue comes from investors, and about half of our revenue now comes from sales teams that are using us as part of their business processes. But we don't necessarily market that as much because we're handpicking who we want as customers in that use case, at least right now, because we don't have full product market fit there. So we pick people who we think are going to be tolerant of where we're at right now and can help us kind of lever up to our next set of customers.
How do you balance the desire to expand to new customer segments with also the desire to achieve product market fit in the first couple?
Oh, yeah, that's very hard. I mean, I think that as a CEO, you have a big vision, so you want to expand as fast as possible. And you get a lot of validation for expanding fast, especially from investors. I think the fundamental thing is you have to expend money and time to do that. So there's only so much you can do. You can either spread yourself really thin and kind of do a mediocre job on a lot of things, or you can pick a couple things and be really good at them. I kind of feel like with our first customer base, which was investors, we got to a point where our product was pretty mature for them. Churn started to drop a lot, and costs to acquire them also started to drop. And so now we're trying to repeat that for this next segment. So I feel like it's sort of like you're constantly layering in new groups as you start to get that flywheel going. So I think you have to be careful because you see companies spend a lot of money and time on stuff that is probably the right thing to do, but maybe not all at the same time. So we've tried to avoid making that mistake.
Since you see so much on the data side and so much on the company side, and just your experience operating, and I know you've been investing for a long time, or before Mattermark. What have you learned as an investor slash? I don't know if you can even invest while you're at Mattermark, but when you have friends who are getting into just starting angel investing, like what mistakes do you see them making?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is don't expect much. I think for me, I always angel invest in people that I just really think are great. And if they lose all the money, I view it like it doesn't matter. I don't know that that is the approach everyone should take. I mean, I'm not writing big checks, but I'm writing checks at a size where like it's kind of if I went to Vegas and that was my budget for losing money in Vegas, it would be fine. Because what you're really paying for is an entry fee into the relationship of being very close to the growth of that company and cheering for their story. So sometimes I think people follow up with the CEOs of these companies like, hey, how come you haven't given me a return on this yet? And I think that's just not a realistic expectation if you're angel investing.
So just assume you'll lose it all.
Yep.
And also, I think you've written a bit about sort of people glamorize consumer a bit too much, and you like more on the enterprise. How is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really hard to build things for consumers because they are, well, they're fickle just in the sense there's a lot of different people. They want a lot of different things. It's really hard to take a huge, I mean, we're all consumers. It's probably just too big a market to focus on for a lot of people initially. I just don't ever feel like I've been good at connecting with customers at that broad of a scale. It's kind of like your question earlier about going broad and how fast you do all the things you want to do. It's like with consumer, you sort of have to be after everyone from day one. And I think that's hard. I just really like when people pay me because then I know I'm creating value for them. And that exchange is very straightforward. And if they stop paying, that's also really helpful as a signal. And I can say, well, what do I have to do to make this right? And it's very clear what needs to happen to win.
On your point about focus, Chris Rock has this quote that he tells people who spread themselves too thin. He goes, why not just suck at one thing?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we suck at lots of things.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you see AngelList like, what is its future role in the investment?
Yeah, I mean, we have for a long time viewed ourselves as kind of the Bloomberg of the ecosystem. I think there is an opportunity for a Wall Street Journal of the ecosystem, which we are considering building because no one's really stepped up to do that. And then there's also the markets themselves. And I think AngelList is one of the markets. You could compare it to the NASDAQ or the NYSE as an exchange where these securities and equities exist and you can invest in them. So I think that they're going to continue to get more sophisticated and make it easier for investors to get into different vehicles, whether it's directly into companies or syndicates or special investment vehicles or other things they're cooking up. And I think Naval has a very long view of the industry, so I expect he's going to just keep cooking up stuff that investors want.
Do you think the normal person who is not an accredited investor will be able to invest? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, will they be able to? It looks like that's where things are headed. I think maybe the more interesting question is, should they? But I think they will be able to. Not everyone should. I think stocks are risky enough in the publicly traded market, and then investing in equities where you have no idea when you're going to be liquid is probably a degree of risk that a lot of people don't really understand. So it's not really part of a diversified strategy. I mean, I'm the daughter of a wealth manager, so to me, I'm just like, okay, have you got every other base covered? If not, probably a bad idea.
since the beginning, the blog and the newsletter, and we've learned a lot from your newsletter, have been very kind of core to Mattermark. Have you? Why have you invested so much in content? Did you always knew you wanted to do that from the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could tell you I had a master plan. I think writing for me is sort of a personal release. Like, it's just nice to share how things are going and be part of a community. And it just happens to be really good for the business too. So it's nice when you can do something that's personally gratifying that also achieves your professional goals. And now that it's working, we want to protect that and grow it. And we're finding that we can attract other people who also love to write and make them part of our team. So it really just comes from a personal passion that's been turned into a part of the business.
Yeah, no, you and Nick and the rest of the team do a great job there. And you just hired Alex.
Yeah.
Kind of a hiring question in general. How do you think about making Mattermark an attractive place for top talent over, companies that are way further along and can presumably offer, more money?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard. The first thing is to give them something to work on that they actually care about. And so we spent a lot of time selling why this is a unique opportunity. I'm sure that's what anyone would say, but I think at the end of the day, people need to be able to envision what their day-to-day life is going to be like. So we try really hard to show them the types of impact they can have and get really specific. People are motivated by internal things too. It's not just money. I think at the end of the day, we can compete with the best companies on comp, but the question is, do you actually think this is an interesting problem to solve? And if they don't, I don't think they should join. So we do a lot of work to matchmake, and it's a two-way process. They're interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them. We do a lot of the standard stuff, like, well, maybe it's not standard, like early exercise for stock options, or really good healthcare, or not working 14-hour days. Those are things that people don't actually ask for in interviews, but when you provide them, they're pretty great. We're transparent, so people know the financials of the business. I don't think it's fun to go to work not being sure if your company's going to be around. So I think it's more like, how do we get the people who are already here to talk about their experience here in a positive and genuine way that then attracts their friends.
How did you think about first let's kind of do it by stages, the earliest of hires? Is a lot of it like people you knew already? Are you just asking who are the most talented engineers you know? Let's start from the kind of baseline. How are you thinking about Berlin?
I mean, I can probably come up with some pretty good spin, but I think at first, at the very, very beginning, you're like, oh my God, will anybody actually join us on this crazy journey? So you're pretty thrilled to talk to anyone who's excited about joining you. And then on top of that, they have to be good. And on top of that, they actually have to be patient enough to imagine building this thing, because in the beginning, you have nothing. And then as you go, I think your bar starts to get higher and higher. You get more people coming in at the top of the funnel, so you can start to be pickier. But I think fundamentally it's more about being on a pretty crazy journey with people at first and just getting them committed to working on the same thing for a while. I mean, we started in an apartment. We were in an apartment for the first 12 people. So you really had to believe in what we were doing, because we did not look legit at all. We didn't have a beautiful office. We didn't have any of the things that made us look like a legitimate venture-backed company that, we didn't. I think our salaries were all $60K for a while. It was like, it kind of was a filter to avoid the startup tourists.
Right. The startup tourist, that's an interesting term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start using that.
Yeah, they come out during boom times.
One thing we haven't mentioned is that you started the company with your husband.
I did.
And how is that? That seems like an incredible journey.
Yeah, so we've been married almost 9 years. And so we'd been married 5 when we started. So I think that helped a lot, because we were through the initial drama that comes with getting married and like staying married. If you make that 5-year mark, that's pretty great. Yeah, I think it's actually pretty weird now because we don't see each other at all during the day. Like we have huge degree of division of labor here between me and my two co-founders. So we have a founder dinner once a week. That's like a co-founder date. I have scheduled dates with Kevin just to make sure we actually hang out. And when we go home, the biggest challenge is just not talking about work, which is super difficult. So we'll be like laying in bed and Kevin will be on his computer and he'll be like, hey, you forgot to follow up with this person on hired.com. And I'm like, fuck you. Leave me alone. I don't want to talk about that right now. But it's really hard because then 5 minutes later, I'm like, so what did you think about that thing Brian said today? And then he's like, what the hell? How can you be so mad at me? And then you bring it up. So it's really hard there's not any clear division. But we're just trying to figure out how to live in the startup.
When couples come to you and say like, hey, we're thinking of doing something similar, do you say like, oh, yeah, good luck? Or like, if you can make it work, what do you say?
I usually say, that's great. I don't know. I feel like if you're worried about it, then maybe you should pay attention to that concern. We never really thought it was weird until we were fundraising. And then we were like, oh, people need to know that I can fire Kevin. So I was walking and be like, I can totally fire him. and eventually it worked out.
Right. You know, it's interesting. My parents were also co-founders, but they were married to other people previously. So it's kind of a juicy story of how that played out. And then ran something for 20 years, and it was awesome.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So no pressure.
You know, one thing is that I should mention is we always ended up working on each other's startups. So we're both serial startup people. So it just felt like if he goes and he works on one startup and I work on another, in our off hours, we're basically going to be consulting for each other's startups. So why not put all the effort into one thing? So if you're both startup people, it might be something to consider because it's more fun to have a shared context to talk about, even if it does mean we don't have any work-life balance. We weren't going to have work-life balance anyway.
Is that kind of a myth? Or what do you think is a better term than work-life balance if that's not something that you go by?
I don't know, life. I just actually like what I'm working on and it's intellectually stimulating. So I find myself thinking about it at other times outside of the workday. But I also have a life and friends and read books and do things. And I don't know, I guess maybe it's a millennial thing, but because my phone is on me, if someone needs something, I don't want to block them. And I'm not going to say, oh no, I'm not working right now. Sorry, you're just screwed till tomorrow. But I don't resent it.
What are your hobbies outside of work? You like to write? You like to read?
Yeah, I have a piano in my house, so I like to make music. I like to make up my own stuff, and then I'm always practicing. I paint, so I'm working on several paintings right now for my house. I can't really afford other people's art, but I can make art, so I can fill my house with color that way. Pretty voracious reader, both of the internet, but really lately I've been reading a lot of kind of older business books, kind of like, especially ones that were written before the internet.
What are some recommended ones?
We just were giving away Flow. It's got this crazy last name, Csikszentmihalyi. I can't remember. I'll put it in the notes. But it talks about just kind of the way to manage your mindset as you work. I think some of these pre-internet books are interesting because people were dealing with information overload before, and it's interesting to see if the strategies they were using to handle that can be applied to the busy world that I'm living in now.
Yeah, you're also a big Ayn Rand fan.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't think this was going to come up.
We don't have to talk.
You know, I am, and I don't even really think about it. I feel like it's a tool that helps me figure out how to live. I'm a big fan of philosophy in general, and discussing ideas and like asking this question of like, what's good and what's a good life going to be like.
How would you describe your philosophical bent? If there are like certain things that you resonate with, or just general?
I think the word that came to mind was worldly. It's like to look at the world and what's in it and use that as a tool for your life, as opposed to bowing down to unknown things. So I'm an atheist. That's probably pretty obvious from what I just said. But not because I want to tell other people how to live, more because I don't want to go through life without clarity about my own choices. So I guess it's very focused on ethics right now. I think the next 10 years of my life is going to be very focused on what's right, what's good. And that's a basis for a lot of the stuff I read and things I blog about right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's very Ayn Randian in some ways, where it's less about telling other people what to do, but it's really about not being told what to do, and not having the government or someone else. And it's interesting. She is so widely loved because of her the strength of her writing in terms of people feeling like they can do anything after reading it, and then also widely disparaged because some people are shy away from that sort of individualism. Why do you think she gets an unfair rep, or why do you think she's misunderstood, or why do you think, or just disliked?
I think fundamentally in our culture, it's a little hard to talk about ideas. From a pretty young age, I think we're taught that this stuff is sort of out of bounds, like we're supposed to take it from other people. What you read in a book is true. Go to church, follow the rules, because it makes it easier to live in society. So I think anytime that you go up against that and you question it, it makes people uncomfortable because there's a little bit of well, now I don't know what you're going to do. You're unpredictable. So I think it's important to understand you're living in a world with other people. It's not that I think these ideas from Ayn Rand or from any philosopher allow you to do terrible things in the world or to other people, but you do need to have a personal view on your life. Otherwise, you just end up as a carbon copy of other people, which I just feel what's the point then? So yeah, I guess my point is, why is she so loved and hated? Probably just because she asks questions that make people uncomfortable.
And you also, do you ask questions that make people uncomfortable, or potentially?
Yeah, all the time. I would say that is one of my goals in life. One of my I have a set of personal principles, and one is I want to be a person who makes other people think.
Yeah.
I think people are hungry for that. So I love whenever there's an opportunity to challenge someone to think differently about their life or their ideas or whatever we're talking about.
Can you share your personal principles if you feel comfortable, or how you came up with them?
Yeah, so there's only 3 right now. So they're just things that sort of keep coming up. And I kind of find myself telling myself to do something, and then I decide to stick with it. So for my business, the rule is don't make the internet worse. For my writing and personal discourse, it's be the kind of person that makes other people think. Some of them are still really personal, I guess. But those are the 2 that I've been talking about. I just wrote a blog post about the tyranny of should, this idea that people are always telling you what you should do. I feel there's something about don't just be plausible, don't do the obvious thing. But that's kind of all I'm fully developed enough on to say. Like I said, I'm spending the next 10 years working on ethics, so I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I don't hear a lot of people in Silicon Valley talking about ethics.
Oh, I think it's underlying so many of the conversations, but maybe not explicitly. But it's underlying a lot of why people get pissed off about things is they don't have a shared set of ideas about what's right or what's good. And I think if we talked about it, we would probably be happily surprised by each other. But yeah, it's not really the core of the conversation right now.
So you're interested in kind of setting the context for people to have that conversation, for raising the questions and creating the dialogue. Have you always
providing data?
Yeah. And have you always been interested in this, or what caused the evolution? Tell me about how you.
I don't even know. I think probably I've just been very curious forever, and I was kind of depressed in high school. And I remember looking at other people and they seemed so happy. And I just wondered, what is it going to take for me to be like them? and you can mimic other people. And I tried that, and it was sort of hollow. And then after that, I felt like, well, there must be something else. So I started reading a lot of books. I learned about Ayn Rand. I kind of explored a lot of different religions and different philosophies and just got really curious. And I guess maybe some people just settle, but I don't want to. And I think there's a lot of other people like me.
There is. What got out of your state in high school? How did you, where did you go from there? Because I know you didn't go, you're deeply intellectual, and you didn't go to college.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about like your background in that.
Well, I mean, I think what really got me out of it was just working. So I did go to community college briefly, and basically discovered community college was going to be a huge regression in terms of the quality of education and frankly, the quality of people. So I decided to take an internship at a company that was one of my father's first customers. It was a Fortune 500 shipping company. And frankly, I just think doing the work for 3 years was pretty cathartic. Like finding out you can be good at something and feeling what it feels like to like go from knowing nothing to some small bit of mastery was sort of addictive. So I kept wanting to learn to do more things and put more pieces together. And I think it's not like I stopped asking the question of who am I, but I spent more time just being someone and then having more life experience to like wrap into those reflections.
So, something I'm curious to ask you in particular, because you're such an autodidact and always learning. What do you think? And college didn't really resonate for me. If I could go back, it's not something that it's evident that I would do again, at least in terms of classes. What do you think? Do you think about the future of education, or do you think about how people should learn, or what do you think? What do you think that's going to look like?
Yeah, I'm not really anti-college. I would say if you're going to go to college, you should try to get the best possible experience that you can, whether that's the caliber of the school or what you choose to focus on. I feel like the biggest difference is the time. So it's 4 years basically that you're focused fully on being in school, but really you're in school however many hours, and then you're doing homework, and then you're living with people and kind of learning how to live as a young adult. I guess I feel like those are pretty valuable 4 years. So maybe we'll see people distributing their education across more of their adult life. So lifelong learning being more of like a cultural thing that people do. We also might see people going to college younger when those years wouldn't be such a huge loss for them. So if you're still developing into a fully formed adult that has good judgment, because you kind of develop your brain, it's not a terrible idea to like be in college from age 12 to 16 instead of age 18 to 22. So I don't know, just like messing with the standards and being more focused on how does that time get used really well rather than checking the box.
It'd be really interesting to see like adults and older people, have like another post experience, especially since we're living so much longer.
I actually feel like that's very likely for me. I am so interested in so many things. I feel like it would be an incredible luxury to go to college now. Like to get to completely focus on philosophy or art or history or economics would be an incredible thing that I can't even imagine giving myself. Like, I don't know, it's just so different from how I viewed college at the first time. So maybe when I don't know what age, but maybe when I'm a billionaire, I'll just go back to college.
Yeah, absolutely. First things first. This question is from Jack. It's around hiring philosophy. And basically, so I asked you what how you make Mattermark an attractive place, but the converse of that is how do you evaluate talent? What do you look for at certain litmus tests? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so each job rec at Mattermark has a very detailed rubric that we use. So we design our interview process. It's hard to answer the question in general terms because each job is different, but we do try to very clearly define the goals we already know the person will have to fulfill And part of the interview is to assess if they have the skills that would be necessary to get on the right track. And then another piece is assessing if they have the attitude to fill the gaps where they don't have the skills yet. Are they resilient enough to learn? Are they coachable? Do they believe that they have room in themselves to get better, or are they is it a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? And then finally, do they match our cultural values? And usually in very explicit terms. So rather than just culture fit as kind of like a BS, do I like them or not, to actually walk through the cultural values and say, what evidence that I see in the conversation of each of these things in this person? So that's kind of a high level, but each one is pretty detailed.
Yeah. What are your cultural values, and how did you come up with them?
Yeah, let's see if I can remember. There's 6 of them. I'm just gonna Google them because I just embarrassed to say, I just don't know how I remember all of them. Let's see. Seek and share the truth is, to me, the most important one. Raise the bar was our first one that we ever had. This is so great, you can Google it. And there's this little Calvin and Hobbes graphic. Yeah, so these were actually really difficult to figure out because it's hard to separate your personal values from the values of the company. So our values are move the needle every day. That one is all about not being afraid to ship stuff and break stuff. Raise the bar was our first value. It's actually on all of our old hoodies. I think we just took it from, there's a Daft Punk song, and we listened to it. We were like, oh, that's what we need to do. Because our work is a lot about grinding. We deal with a lot of data, and there's a lot of points where you're just exhausted and you want to stop. Win as a team, because we realized we were really competitive and we could easily focus on just winning as individuals. Don't worry, there's only 6, 3 more to go. Sorry, there's a lag here on the screen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay, sorry about that. So Seek and Share the Truth is a lot about the data journalism that we do and just constantly trying to get closer and closer to the truth. A lot of the data we deal with on private companies is directionally correct, but we're always trying to get closer and closer to accuracy. Focus on customers. It seems pretty self-evident, but make sure that we use them as a basis for how we make decisions. And then think long-term. So if there's a decision that you have to make, and you can either win in the short term or make the right call for your future self or the future company to make the right call for the future. I think those are going to change. That's the thing about values. I think that those were reflective of the time when we set them, and that was about 18 months ago. And I already see certain ones like transparency that were always important, but are now getting elevated to actually being on that slide. So it's interesting how they're constantly changing.
And what's happened in the past 18 months that's made you realize that transparency is more important? Like, you share all your, Jack here asks, why do you share all your detailed financials? Tell us about the.
Yeah, I think it was always important, but you're always trying to figure out, is this just a behavior or is it a value? Like, is it a thing we do, or is it a thing where if we stop doing something would be wrong? I think the value we get out of being transparent is just so incredible that I want to make sure we create a place where we never stop doing that. The feedback, pissing people off is also really powerful. Getting a reaction because it's important tells me this isn't just a throwaway comment. This is a thing to dig into. If you're not transparent, then those conversations just never start.
Have you ever been too transparent to a fault where you said, nah, I didn't need to say that? When is it, if there is, when is transparency?
Sorry, I didn't hear part of your question. Was it where's the limit of transparency?
Yeah.
So I'm still finding it. I definitely do get in trouble. There's a range of getting in trouble. Getting in trouble could be making someone you care about uncomfortable, which might still be the right thing to do, but you need to do it with a certain amount of care or love. Then there's like revealing things that you didn't have the right to reveal. For example, we don't share everyone's compensation inside the company. And part of the reason you have to be careful is people don't always get enough context to understand what's getting shared. So if you're gonna be transparent, you have to do the work to actually set the stage for the entire set of information you're sharing. So like when we share our financials, I probably spend 20 or 30 hours on that blog post because I need to make sure I've covered most of the most important questions so that it's clear I've thought through the reader's experience, like their next natural question. And sometimes you just don't have enough time to do that work. And so you have to hold off and say, until I can do this right, I can't share it.
Yeah. This is from @Wallenex. Tell us about a time where you made a huge mistake as an entrepreneur. And
well, my Referrally was a huge mistake. Basically, I built a business I found was really interesting personally, where I had a side project that shortened links to products across thousands of affiliate programs because I was lazy and I didn't want to go join them all. And then I shared it with some friends. I got about 500 friends using it. It was making money. Got into Y Combinator with it. And I think for a while it just felt like, oh, this has all the things it needs to be plausible. It checks the boxes on people are using it. It's making money. It's written up in TechCrunch. It satisfies my ego needs. But then a little ways in, I finally made a long-term model of what the business was going to look like and discovered just how crappy the margins were. And the problem with low margins is not just the academic one. If you don't have much margin, that means you don't have much money to spend on building new stuff because you just don't have a lot of room for error. You have to build all the right things and you have to make sure that you never spend too much getting customers. Whereas like the high margin business, you can build the wrong tech for a while and it's all right because you're still making way more money per unit. So I think the huge mistake was just I didn't think about it like a business until I was about to fundraise, and I really should have thought about it as a business from day one because I was still going to have to run the company even if I couldn't raise money. I was still stuck with it. And that's why we had to put a bullet in it, not just because it was not backable, because once you realize how low a payback you're getting on your effort, it's sort of insulting. So it was just a waste of time. It's like lesson learned is be more thoughtful up front. And I think we've tried really hard to do that this time around from, taking that from that lesson.
And before you did that, you were the first employee at Twilio.
Yes.
Incredibly successful company. Looking back, how important, if at all, was that experience necessary for you to be doing what you're doing now? And alternatively put, when you advise people just getting out of college or just starting out who want to start something or who are unsure if they should start something, you advise that they get operating experience at a bigger company or early at a company that could be big like Twilio?
Yeah, when I joined Twilio, it was not clear it was going to be big. We had no funding, and it was 2009. The economy was in the shitter. So, I think the most important thing I tell people right out of school is just go do something so you can figure out what you don't like. Just work. There's really so much out there to work on. So I wish I could tell you I was an amazing investor and I picked that Twilio stock and I was like, all right, I'm going to get in early on this. But I really just thought the work was interesting, and they hired me to make customer videos and manage their support community and social media. And then I ended up taking on a ton of other things. But yeah, I don't think I'm not very good at predicting the future. So I'm more interested in making sure what I'm doing now is interesting to me personally. And Twilio was absolutely necessary for my success because I loved every minute I worked on it, and it just reinforced how important it is to do work that you really love. And I hold that as a bar of what I want to feel like in my own company.
Right. So when people say that they want to start something, you say go for it? You don't say that they need to have experience?
No, I think if you're unsure, you should ask yourself what you think you're missing. And if that matters to you more than the reasons that are starting your company, then I guess it does. I think it's honestly 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Like the rates of failure for startups are so high that you could do all the preparation in the world and wait 10 years and start your startup and still fail. So why not just fail right now and learn from that and then iterate? I don't think there's any preparation that's going to prevent you from failing in the future.
Why not just fail right now? That sounds like a t-shirt.
Probably is.
So this question was also on Twitter. How did you convince Alex to join Mattermark? You know, I know you're very persuasive, but you know, what's your pitch?
I think it was whiskey. I've been reading Alex for a long time, and we've met up a bunch of times over the past couple of years. And I just noticed that he was one of the few tech journalists that really enjoy technical analysis of stocks and finances. And if you follow his Twitter feed, I think he asks some really good questions. So I would just kind of engage with him, and I wanted to do editorial pretty early on and asked his advice on how we might run it, and it wasn't the right time. And then we finally got to the point where we had a beer, and I asked him again, like, is it the right time? And the answer was yes this time. So I don't know if I have any super special persuasive powers. He's definitely got a mind of his own, but that's part of why I like him so much. I think he's going to be a really good balance to me, and he's going to have full editorial control of the blog and ultimately our whatever editorial property we put out. So I trust him a lot, and I think he's really talented.
Twitter is a big part of your life.
Yeah.
You make friends through it. You make enemies through it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I do.
You share great thoughts through it. You ever wake up and feel like, I don't feel like tweeting today, or I don't feel like being like the public, Danielle today, or?
Yeah, I totally feel that. One thing you might notice, and I don't think anyone stalks me this much to notice, but I don't really tweet during the day unless it's very work related, like promoting some of our shit or whatever. And I do most of my tweeting at night. And I really do view it as a community that I'm a part of. It's not like the Danielle show. I actually, like last night I got in a huge debate about something, and I get a lot of value from that conversation, and I don't feel like I'm being some other person. I really hate the feeling of being CEO Danielle. I really am trying hard to just be one person in my life so that I don't have to feel like I'm putting on or taking off a mask. So sometimes if I feel like I've somehow been less genuine and I have to like keep up some act, it's almost like I'll take a little break just to reset, because I don't want to go too far down that path. If that makes sense. I definitely know what you're talking about, though.
I feel like the term authentic is a bit overused these days.
Yeah, it is.
I don't even know what it means anymore.
I mean, I just want to not have to lie about who I am. So I guess that's what authentic is supposed to mean. I think that almost like when you talk about it, it almost slips away from you just as you're saying the word.
Like the more one says they are, the less they are almost.
Yeah, because it's not really about other people thinking you're authentic. It's about something that's happening for you in the way you experience interacting with the world, and it's awfully hard to figure out how to share that.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, speaking of, so basically, I'm going to say a thinker's name, and I want you to say if you where you have kind of a disagreement with them or a nuanced disagreement with them, and obviously you're going to agree with a lot of these people.
Who they are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can I Google them?
You'll know.
Okay.
You'll know who they are. You agree with a lot of them. So disclaimers: they're all brilliant people, and you agree with a lot of them in a lot of different ways. But great thinkers have disagreements on a few different things. So the first is Peter Thiel. Where, if at all, do you disagree with Peter on something?
I don't know if I know enough about what Peter. I agree with him on a lot of things.
Cool. How about?
I like him. Come on, try again.
Mark Andreessen.
This is totally not how I index people, by the way, about how I disagree with them.
Yeah, of course.
I'm sure I disagree with, I mean, I know I disagree with Mark. I feel like I argue with him on Twitter all the time. What's the latest thing? Well, we had a disagreement last night about whether or not we should cover, no, that's not quite accurate. We had a disagreement about how we should cover zombie companies and whether it was appropriate to make lists of companies that might be on the outs. I don't know if I still disagree with him because we had a pretty interesting conversation, so I'm still kind of thinking over the advice I got. But I fundamentally believe you do need to tell the negative stories to give context to the positive stories. That in order to appreciate heroes and wins, you need to also be able to see how hard it is. And I think we're still coming to a point of agreement about the appropriate way to do that. So I don't know if we ultimately disagree or not.
Is there a strong critic of Silicon Valley culture or something specific that you are extremely sympathetic to or somewhat sympathetic to that comes to mind?
Well, you know, this is a criticism I don't hear as much right now, but I think the criticism that everybody's trying to raise money and that not every idea should be backed with venture capital, I think that criticism has a lot of weight. I think there are a lot of things that ultimately don't need VC money, and unfortunately, once they take it, there are certain expectations that can't be met, and then something that could have been a really great business for an individual or a small group of people to run gets shut down when it could have been an excellent, $5 or $10 million a year business with, imagine paying yourself $1 million a year.
Yep.
Like for most people, that's more life-changing than the exit that they're going to get from taking a gamble on the VC roulette wheel. So I'm sympathetic to that questioning of whether everything should actually be funded.
Are there way too many investors and way too many founders out there right now?
No, I mean, there's just the right amount. It's just the market, but I think the criticism is that people aren't thoughtful enough about why they're taking money. They just do it because it's like, oh, I'm out of college, I want to be an entrepreneur. This is yet another thing that will give me prestige and validate what I'm doing rather than like asking deeper questions.
And how should that entrepreneur evaluate whether their idea, merits VC?
Well, I think VCs have a responsibility here to help them. They actually know a lot about what should and shouldn't be venture backed. So I think that one of the responsibilities founders have is to have very honest conversations when they do go out to those investors of like, well, walk me through how you're sizing the market. Because the reality is founders aren't great at that at the beginning. Honestly, founders probably should just focus on creating things. Like, I don't know that everybody needs to get an MBA in building models about their business, but just being honest about what you say to yourself in your head about where this is going, and then what you say to other people and keeping those things aligned. I don't know, it's very hard. I do think there's a big responsibility that investors have as generally older and wiser members of the ecosystem to like help founders make good decisions on this stuff.
A common trope right now is that everyone wants to be a founder and no one wants to be helping some founders super early, one of the first 10 employees. How do you think Silicon Valley can make it more attractive to be part of that early team?
Well, I think that trope is kind of bullshit. I think that people say that when they're struggling to retain or hire talent, but then they didn't do a very good job retaining the talent. Like, if you have amazing people working for you who can be founders, then you should pay them a lot, and you should give them a lot of equity, and you should give them a lot of control, and you should give them a lot of enablement to make choices and be free to run their part of the business. So I feel like, I don't know, that trope. I guess I just listed all the things that you need to do. You need to treat them like the most important thing in your company if they're the most important thing, and not just when they're leaving. I think equity for employees and startups is really fucked up, And I don't think you can just fix it by having founders give away more equity. I think there's a lot of parts of the model that just are very complicated. There's expectations the VCs have from their LPs about the percentage of the company they're going to buy in a round. There's a lot of rules of thumb that get followed and are very hard to break. And there's a lot of signaling too. So if I was to carve out a much larger chunk of equity for my employees and put them in an options pool, the way options pools works is suboptimal for a bunch of reasons. So there's just like structural things that you can't complain about how things work and not change the fundamental structure.
Do you think those structures are going to change, or there's just not enough momentum or need to?
I think they change in the most successful companies. So I think companies who are really hot can demand things that other companies can't, like different percentage of the company getting sold. But I would say that's pretty much an outlier. It probably less than 5% of deals in a given year are doing outlier things. And I don't know if that's really going to change.
How have you thought about scaling Mattermark from a company that, when you go from, 20 people to 40 people to, how big are you guys right now?
We're 40.
And, in the next year, you're going to be, much bigger than that. How do you think about the different stages?
Yeah, I mean, basically I'm expecting everything to break all the time. Processes break, tools that we were using suddenly don't scale. Obviously on the engineering side, as our customer base and our data set gets bigger, things break. So staying flexible and keeping a growth mindset rather than starting to get stressed out by the constant change. I feel that's actually something that's really hard on startup employees if they don't know what they're getting themselves into, is the fact that like whatever company they join will be completely destroyed and recreated over the course of 18 months, and they're going to have to be really flexible. So I think a lot about how to get the muscle memory for that in place so that as we evolve, people don't get so freaked out that they have to leave. So a lot of that is the transparency and the human relationships so that people will actually talk to each other and say like, hey, I'm really scared about this thing that's happening and I don't know why I'm scared, but I'm open to actually talking to a manager or a teammate about that. Because that's not actually the culture of a lot of companies and places people come from. So you have to kind of fight against what they're used to the culture being.
Are you a believer in rituals? Do you have any daily rituals that you?
Oh, did you say rituals?
Yep.
Yeah, lots. Both for myself personally and for the company. So for the company, I think most rituals are about communication. So on Fridays, we get everybody together at 4:00 and we do a retrospective, talk about what happened that week and how we're doing against our goals and kind of where things are going. We do a town hall and answer questions, and we share the financials and a lot of other metrics. On Monday, the teams do individual kickoffs, and these meetings are run the same way every time, so you know what to expect. We do one-on-ones every week. Every manager does a one-on-one with every one of their employees. I thought that was normal. I thought everybody did that. And then I tell people that and they're like, holy shit, how do you find time? But I just feel like it's a really important ritual to like sit down, break bread, and talk about whatever's going on. So to me, those are, I know those sound very businessy, but those are rituals. If you do them, you take the seriousness of them into account. And then personally, I just have like the first 3 hours of my day very much the same every day. And that helps me set the stage for my life. Yeah, I wake up at 5. I spend the first hour drinking espresso and not talking to anyone and reading. I spend the second hour triaging my email and updating our hiring pipeline at home in complete silence, which is great because I don't get distracted. And I spend the third hour kind of putting on my armor, like figuring out what, I'm actually dressed super casual today, but figuring out what I'm going to wear, doing my hair, doing my makeup, because I've realized that that is like a way of me sending a signal to myself, like, all right, game face is on. That's actually been one of the most interesting pieces of the ritual for me because it's pretty feminine and I feel like it's newer and it's like, I think I was a bit of a tomboy for a while and I almost just deprioritized some of that like self-care and like looking pretty and just kind of put that in the back burner, like, oh, you don't need to worry about that. You need to go run the company. But it actually makes the whole day better.
How did that come about? Tell me when that evolution happened.
Well, it actually kind of started in London when I was still working for Twilio because the business culture there is pretty different. And I was meeting with a lot of big clients. So I was pretty much wearing a dress every day and heels because I had to. And at first it felt like the most annoying thing ever to deal with. I mean, I know you're a dude, but like there's just a lot of work that goes into that. And I'm sure you know. But after a while, you get used to it. I mean, I think you can get used to anything. And then I realized even in moments where I felt like I was a mess inside, I knew that I looked like a lady. I looked like I was behaving. And so I could get away with pretty much anything. And now I feel like I act ladylike so that I can kind of get away with misbehaving, if that makes any sense.
No, totally. I just wake up looking this good, so I know that I'm very blessed. No work.
Yeah, you just wake up like that.
Yeah. So we're nearing the end here. I want to ask a couple last questions. What's something that you used to fervently believe, whether, as a CEO professionally or just personally, intellectually, that something you used to fervently believe that you now see as fundamentally misguided, something that you change your mind on?
Well, I believed in God till a certain point, and Santa Claus. And I mean, if we talk about fervent, oh, I know. I didn't really believe in God fervently, so that feels like a bad answer. I used to believe when I was like 19, 20, 21, just starting working, that you could get anything done in a 24-hour period of time. And I even like had that as one of my personal principles or like mantras I would tell myself. And now I realize there's some things that just can't get done in 24 hours. And sometimes the most worthwhile things can't get done in 24 hours. So that's been an adjustment and I'm learning to be more patient.
And is the implication there that things take longer, or that you need to that you can't just do, you need to prioritize what really needs to get done and focus on?
I think it's both. I think it's sometimes you could do things in 24 hours, but that would be the wrong way to go. Mm-hmm. You should take the time.
Yeah. And lastly, what advice would you give? You can go back in time to your, let's say, 23-year-old self. What would you tell your?
Oh man, probably just don't worry about stuff so much. Like you're so stressed out, it's gonna be fine. Just keep doing it, and don't worry too much about what other people think. Because honestly, they forget what you did 2 years ago so fast that it really just doesn't matter.
Danielle, this has been a fantastic conversation. That's a great note to end on. You have some of the most blab points I've ever seen in a blab. You're killing me on that.
Yes.
So, thank you for taking the time. And lastly, any plugs for anything upcoming at Mattermark? Where can people find you online? Anything you want to promote or any ask you have of the product and audience?
Sure. I mean, I think I'll just mention that Alex has just joined the company, and starting on Monday, we will be publishing original editorial. So you can go to mattermark.com and you can check out our blog and also subscribe for our free newsletter, which comes out every day and on Saturdays. And I would love to continue to engage with the audience on Twitter at Danielle Morrill. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, I think this has been a real pleasure. I mean, you've been a friend to Ryan, to me, to Product Hunt for a while, and this has been a ton of fun. Thank you, Danielle, and we'll continue the conversation on Twitter.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Bye, Danielle. Thanks, everybody, for joining another episode of Product Hunt Live. And This has been awesome. If you have any feedback, shout out at Product Hunt Live, at Eric Torenberg. Thank you for the Product Hunt team that makes this possible, and all the engineers behind it. Thank you for the Blab team. Blab is a hell of a product. Y'all should be podcasting and doing cool stuff on Blab. Shout out to Sean on that. And yeah, thank you. Let us know what other guests you want to see. We have a lot of great ones coming. Check that out at producthunt.com/live. This will also be released as a podcast. If you have any feedback for how this can be better, feel free to tweet at Product Hunt or at Product Hunt Live, and or email me at eric@producthunt.com. Thank you, everybody, and have an amazing weekend. Peace.